This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I think Pointer, Lilleberg, and Charlie are all close, if not for sure, coming back. They should be ready to go. Tony, you saw he's had a red jersey out there, so he's kind of TBD still. I think he needs to get in some contact drills, and then we can determine a little bit better on how what our decision is next week. But he's still got a week too, so we got some time.
That one guy we didn't see was Max. I understand that he's going to miss some time.
Yeah, he's going to be out for a little bit. I think you guys heard he had a lower body, and we're going to miss him for quite some time here. So the good news is you saw what the guys we had not playing. Dustus, Lilleberg, you saw what they were doing for 30 games before they got injured. So we got guys coming in that we're really confident in.
Rob Zettler. Give us an update on some of the players being out. We are live.
Yeah, that was last week, by the way.
That was last
I think that press conference occurred shortly before the press release came out about Crozier's surgery. So Zetz was kind of tiptoeing around it, but it was a core surgery, which is abdominal.
Yeah.
And the projected timeout, as we said on yesterday's show, is 10 weeks, and that was a week ago. So 9 weeks. That takes you to the end of the regular season. It's been a really tough injury year for Crozier. At one point he said, I'm usually down for one injury a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes shorter, sometimes longer. And this is before this last one. He's like, I've had so many injuries this year, and a lot of them are just, bad luck.
You think you've been around hockey long enough? We both have followed sports in general. Do you feel like the injury bug follows some players more than others? It's like, I don't want to say guys are brittle, but
look, Andrew Cogliano had that incredible Ironman streak that ended. I think he got suspended, didn't he? That's how the Ironman streak ended.
I think you're right.
But they're they're definitely the exception. Most players miss time here and there, maybe a game or two. Maybe there's something to that. I don't know. You've talked about Chernak as a shot blocker. So, I think if you regularly are blocking shots, the likelihood of you having to miss some time goes up.
Yeah, I would agree.
Everybody blocks shots, but some guys block more shots, right? Now, Ian Cole, who's this year playing for Utah, he is one of the top shot blockers in the NHL. I feel like he's extremely durable, though. I'm going to have to go back and look. I think most years he's playing all 82.
Sure.
Or close to it. So I don't know. But there's no question sometimes it's just bad luck, right? You get hit a certain way, you do block a shot, hits you in the wrong spot. We didn't really get into this, and I didn't hear the television crew correct it, but I saw it on the replay. So if you recall, Greg, in the gold medal game between the U.S. and Canada, near the end of the second period. So Canada just tied it at 1. U.S. has the puck in the offense zone. Brock Faber takes a shot. At the time, they thought it hit 2 posts. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
Right near the end of the second period.
I do remember that. Yeah.
So they're like, that hit both posts, like one
Heads
post
up.
across the other post.
Yeah, right.
And so when they showed the overhead, though, it actually, Jake Gensel comes from behind the net to the one side. It hits him in the glove. So it hit his glove and then hit the post. This would have counted. This wouldn't have been a hand pass. It would have just deflected off the glove. But at the time, when I saw that, I saw him shake his hand like it stung him.
Sure.
I'm like, boy, I hope he comes back for the third period. He did, right? But, you could get injured on a play like that. You could break your wrist on a play like that.
Yeah. Well,
that's
also,
not one player being more prone to injury than another, but it can happen.
Well,
if you go to high traffic areas, you are going to get hit by some pucks.
Yeah, the shot blocking one, I think I'm less inclined to say you're more injury prone unless you start getting injuries beyond the shot blocking that those areas have been hit by the puck, and are they more susceptible to other types of collisions that lead to the injury happening. The concussion one is an interesting one because I think we have seen players, you get hit once and then you're more susceptible to the concussion, even if it's just a not as vicious hit. These are some of the things I think Brandon Hagel is working through, obviously. And, I think Victor Hedman for a bit, maybe there was some. Sidney Crosby, probably the best example of some things there. I think what makes it so unusual when he got hurt in the Olympics is that for the most part he has been healthy.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting for a player like Crosby. So he had the enormous absence from the concussion that he sustained in the Winter Classic, January 1st, 2011. So he missed basically the rest. He missed the rest of that year, basically. He played 2 days later, and Hedman bumped him, and then he was out. And I think he has had subsequent concussions and had to miss some time. It hasn't been as long. And those concussions, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, happened sooner rather than later after the original one that knocked him out in 2011. I mean, knock on wood for Crosby, like he has dodged that. I mean, not just that he stayed healthy, but you worry when you have a bad concussion that subsequent checks are more likely to lead to additional concussions.
That is it.
And I mean, Crosby has avoided that really through we'll just say the latter part of his career. And that's great. I mean, great for him, but it kind of runs contrary to maybe the narrative that you hear. I mean, Brian Bradley, if you ever have a chance to talk to him, like he had to retire because of a concussion. I mean, I think he still has some issues. They aren't like debilitating to the point that he can't do what he's doing. Like he's involved with Lightning alumni and involved with the organization. And a lot of times when sponsors come on trips, Brian Bradley's there to be there too. And meet and greet and spend time with them. But I had heard that, like there was a time it was difficult for him to be in a room with the lights on, talking about well after the original injury. So it's a very difficult thing for some players. Other players, like, you spent some time working with Chris Dingman, as did I. You talked to Chris Dingman, he's like, yeah, I got a concussion. Yeah, I got in a fight, got a concussion. I don't mean to laugh about it, but like the concussions didn't really affect him in the same way either during his playing days or since he retired.
No.
So it's kind of a luck of the draw a little bit, but I mean, I'm really glad for Crosby that this isn't kind of following him around after sustaining a pretty major concussion injury, let's be honest, early in his career. I mean, he was still in his early 20s at that time, right?
It's a fair point. And I think for a lot of Lightning fans, bringing it back to the team, it has been a season that the injury bug just has not gone away. Now, I think some of that is just sports in general. You're going to be dealing with injuries throughout. It feels like it has been a snowball effect with this team.
And now we are going to have the condensed schedule. It's something that we have talked about on the show.
Yeah, it's here, right?
And people are trying to draw the line between condensed schedule or a busier schedule than normal and more injuries. And Coop and Julian have actually pushed back against that. They're like, it's going to be after the Olympics. While the Lightning have 27 games left, they're going to play those 27 games in 50 days. And I think it's really going to get squeezed more in the first 3 weeks, let's say, than the last 3 weeks of this 6-week stretch that we have before the regular season ends. And we'll see how they do. We'll see if they can avoid more injuries. Hopefully they can. Obviously.
Well, it's a good point by you about the condensed schedule, because I think a lot of us, we've talked about it, and maybe it hasn't actually occurred. We keep thinking it is because we feel like there's a lot of games playing and you're getting the sprint to the Olympics, and then you get these 2 weeks off. I think the fact that you got this time off for a lot of people allows you to reset and brace yourself for what's coming. Now, what's coming? Basically every other day. I mean, that's kind of where we are. And, the question will be, does your body hold up under this type of stress? Because it will be stress. Because now, there's going to be travel involved.
Yes.
There's going to be some games are more physical than others. I think what's interesting for Tampa Bay, and I can't stress this enough, and Mish, I know you've talked about it as well. We have made this a point on our show. This is why getting off to an incredible start, well, minus the first few games, being where they are now, having won 5 in a row, 78 points, in first place in the Atlantic. That is why it was so impressive and so important to do well before this craziness approaches starting tomorrow. Because should you play 500, I'm throwing a theoretical out there.
Right.
You're still going to give yourself a chance. It may not be first place, but it's going to give you a fighting chance, maybe a good enough chance to be a playoff team. Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be some adversity. There may be some scheduled losses coming up. You and I probably won't like to admit it, or we won't use that as an excuse. But as much hockey that's going to be played, we may be looking at this and saying, man, I just didn't think the Lightning had their legs in that game. And there's maybe various reasons.
Right.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
This is why, and bring it back here to John Cooper, bring it back to the organization and the depth. This is why this season, with all the injuries and knowing what you're about to encounter, has been so impressive in terms of what they've accomplished, because they've given themselves an opportunity, if it happens, where if their play suffers, they're going to be okay. Now, look, if they go out and they go 2-15, that's a problem.
Right.
That's a problem, but we don't think that's going to happen.
They've built a big cushion. And I mean, there are a couple of ways we
it.
can look at it. We talk a lot about playoff pace. The Lightning are at 55 games. So at 50 games, you wanted to be at 60 points, right?
Yeah.
So they are at 78 points. So at 60 games, they needed to get to 72 points. Let me put it that way. So where they needed to reach at the end of this 10-game segment, and they're only halfway through this 10-game segment, they already have 6 bonus points for the next 10-game segment. Yep. So they could theoretically, like, if they start off here and lose 5 straight in regulation, and they're at the same point total after 60 games, they still will have 6 bonus points. That is how well they have done and how much they've helped themselves. Now, clearly, you and I don't want them to start 0-5 coming out of the break here, but if it happens, like, they still have a huge cushion. Every point they get between now and the next 10-game segment starting is going to be an additional bonus point. There's another way to look at it. We talk about 96 as kind of the benchmark where you want to be after 80 games. Usually 96 is enough to just get you in the playoffs after 82. The Lightning are only 18 points away from 96 points. That's 9 wins. They have 27 games left. So just like we were talking about, the Panthers don't have a lot of mulligans left before they basically are at 100 points for their max total. And then every game after that they might lose in regulation goes to 98, 96, 94. Their ceiling is way lower than a lot of other teams, and certainly way lower than the Lightning's. So the Lightning have this huge ceiling, right? I mean, They have 27 games left. That's 54 available points. They don't need all 54 points. So that just kind of backs up what you were saying, that, the work that they did, especially, going 19-1-1 in 21 games going into the Olympic break, it's put them in a fantastic position. And we'll see, 100%. After 82, where all of these teams are. I'll be very curious to see if some teams eclipse 96 and don't get into the playoffs. If it's going to happen for more than the odd team here and there, this would be the year. But I'm also curious to see if we start to see the clubs that are below the playoff cut line lose some steam and slow down.
When is the
so
trade
that
deadline?
The top 8 are going to be at 96 and higher.
When is the trade deadline again?
That's a good question. I know the roster. I keep calling it the roster freeze. Well, it is a roster freeze. Yeah, that you can make trades. Lifted, right? You can move players off your roster as of, I think, the 22nd, as of Sunday night. So we're looking at another week and a half to 2
March
weeks
6th,
before the trade deadline.
I have here
That's
Friday,
2 weeks.
March 6th at 3 p.m.
Little under 2 weeks.
What I'm trying to imply, and maybe this speaks to your point a little bit, was as we get into the nuts and bolts of the schedule being condensed, to your point, do we start to see some teams fall back?
Yeah.
Maybe because of that, do we see more sellers? Potentially.
Well, there's not a lot of time though before the trade deadline arrives. So that's really a hard call for some general managers. What I think may happen beyond that, though, Like the teams that are going to need to get above the playoff cut line that currently are below the playoff cut line, they are going to have to grind it out.
Yep.
And it is very difficult to make up ground at this point in the season. It just is historically. Yep. So some of those teams are going to keep grinding, particularly if they start racking up some points and keep themselves in contention. But the teams that it's just becoming more and more unrealistic, it's hard. Like it's hard to just keep digging and grinding when you know you have basically no shot mathematically. And they're not dummies, Greg. I mean, they can see where they are in the standings and how much ground they might need to make up. And when that happens, so you kind of exhale a little bit.
That is the silent killer, is when you feel like you're not that far away from, let's say, the 8th or the 2 wild cards. Let's say, I'm giving you an example here, but you've got like 7 teams or 5 teams in front of you. And let's say you win 5 in a row and you move up 1 spot.
Yeah.
Like that mentally, we talk about the grind physically, but mentally, that is going to be a challenge because you've got to be looking at the standings. I mean, I know players will say publicly they don't.
I think they do, though, later in the season.
You have to be.
They are looking at the standings.
I think you have to be.
They're aware of what they need to accomplish to get into the playoffs. Last thing I'll say is just as we have a question popping up here, but the Lightning are on the lower end. In fact, they are one of the teams that has played the fewest games. So they're at 55. So they have 27 games left. But even the teams that have played more, let me see which team has played the most. I see 58 here. Caps have played 59. So it looks like the Caps are the most at 59. But most teams are in that 57, 58 range. Fewer at 56. You're still looking at 25 games left, let's say. That's still a condensed schedule.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult when you're playing 4 games in 6 nights to get 7 points. Like kind of what you were saying, you need these points. Mm-hmm. It's not just that you need to go on a run. You need to win lots of games that are close together where you're going to have some games that are not to your advantage schedule-wise. And maybe your opponent is also having a busy schedule, but maybe you're playing the second half of a back-to-back on the road. So that's where the challenge becomes even more challenging and the hill becomes steeper for the teams that really need to make up ground.
That's fair.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. Andrew this is also going to be an interesting topic, but you and I have talked about this. I think it's easier said than done. I think Coop should strategically rest players given the schedule as long as the cap space will allow it. We may lose some battles, but a better chance of winning the war.
So, Andrew, this is not the NBA with load management. First of all, it's not done a lot in the NHL, but the other part is just a realistic handicap, if that's the right way of putting it, and that is the NHL has this hard salary cap. So, I mean, the Lightning only have so many extra players. Now, you want to say that for maybe a player or two that's played in the Olympics, you give them a night off every now and then. Maybe that's what Andrew is suggesting. But to let's just use Brandon Hagel as an example. To say to Brandon Hagel, we have 27 games left. We want to rest you for 10 of those. Like that's just not going to happen, right? And maybe you might say, we're going to play Brandon Hagel less. I don't think that's going to happen either. The league is just not set up to allow teams, unless they have a ton of cap space, because you can expand your roster after the trade deadline. But most teams, honestly, are still like the Lightning. They don't have a lot of room to add a bunch of players and sit guys strategically to, quote-unquote, rest them. Now, what I do think is going to happen, and we've seen it already from the Lightning and other teams, lots of days off between games, especially when you're on the road. Now, the Lightning do a lot of heavy lifting on the road between now and, let's say, the 3rd week in March. So let's say their really condensed, busy stretch is going to be in the next, let's say, 3.5 weeks. Then they have a 7-game homestand, Greg. And I know the games come quickly there, but look for them to have lots of off days where they aren't playing games. That's where you rest players. I may be proven wrong.
Yeah.
But maybe a Vasilevsky situation, but Vasi didn't play in the Olympics. Too. So maybe you give Johansson more games. Like that is a possibility if you're kind of really insecure playoff positioning. We'll see. That's a little bit of a different category. But to suggest that like these Olympians have played a lot of hockey and Coop should strategically not dress them, I just don't think that's going to happen.
So I want to throw something out here, and we have some questions I want to get to. Brian Engblom, by the way, is going to be joining us at some point. Happy to have Brian on at Bolts Radio if you want to weigh in. Outside the box thinking. If you were of the belief that one of the reasons the Lightning, right after their potential run for a three-peat ended, and you felt like the next year or the next couple of years, the reasons for an early exit were because they were fatigued, the opposite can be true. You've had some longer off seasons now. Mm-hmm. And so potentially, should those tired legs be a little bit more rested and fresh now? Maybe. The other thing, too, is injured players haven't been playing all that much this year. Should they have a little bit more gas in the tank towards the end? Look, Victor Hedman wants to play in every game. Ryan McDonough wants to play in every game. Dave, you and I talk about this. That's the mentality of hockey players. They want to play if they've got no teeth, if they've got, a hammy, a sore shoulder, and we see that in the playoffs. Guys play through a ton. But if you believe that some early exits were because the Lightning had tired legs from previous runs winning the Stanley Cup, does the same also apply that they may have a little bit more juice left in their systems to have a deeper run because they have been eliminated early on and they've had a longer off season and they have had 2 weeks for the most part here to kind of recoup, and they've had a lot of star players not play this year. So does Victor Hedman want to play in all 82 games? Of course he does. But Dave, do you think it's the worst thing if the Lightning are going to make the playoffs and that Heddy, has maybe only played X amount of games, but might be a little more fresh once the playoffs start? That's how I'm going to look at it, and maybe that's a naive way of thinking, but you can't apply the one scenario and potentially not at least give credence to the other scenario that maybe you can use this to your advantage.
Well, I think if you take Crozier out of the mix of defensemen, which we are doing, I think the Lightning still have 8 defensemen.
Yeah.
Because you got Carlisle, and you got Hedman, and you got Destu and Lilleberg, in addition to Moser, Radish, Chernak, McDonough. That's 8. So to your point, if they carry 8 the rest of the way, you're dressing 6 or 7. So some defensemen are going to be scratched, and you could do a rotation there potentially to let guys rest. You could. That is probably more feasible than the forward situation, particularly as the Lightning have injuries at forward. And right now they're a little bit, when I say short, I just mean like Cirelli's in a red no contact jersey. Nick Paul's not on the ice. Those are 2 guys who are currently out. So I don't know. We'll see. This is just my 2 cents on what's happened in the playoffs the last 3 years, and then we can get more questions. I actually want to give an update on what's going on in practice today, which they practiced earlier. Brian's actually going to join us after media availability is done. So the first year after the 3 straight runs to the Stanley Cup final, I thought the Lightning they could have won that first round series against Toronto. I thought that they outplayed the Maple Leafs. It's funny because Jim Ralph, who does the Leafs games on radio, and we've talked about this, and he agrees with me. In 2022, the teams met in the first round. The Lightning won in 7 games. I thought the Maple Leafs outplayed the Lightning. In 2023, the Leafs beat the Lightning. I thought the Lightning outplayed the Leafs. He agrees with me. Sometimes, you can outplay a team and the other team makes some plays, right? Remember, the Leafs won 3 overtime games in Tampa that year in 2023. So all the plays that tipped the series to the Toronto side of the ledger were made by the Maple Leafs, which that counts. Like, I'm not saying they didn't earn the series win, but the Lightning played well. I mean, they didn't play like a tired team. They took it to the Leafs. during that series. They just happen to lose. That happens sometimes. I think the next 2 years they ran into a juggernaut. That's how I see it. So I don't think that the three deep runs had as much of an impact on what we saw happen in the last 3 playoff years where they've gone out in the first round. Brian is ready. As Brian gets ready, though, just a quick mention. The Lightning had a practice today. Cirelli in the red no-contact jersey. No Nick Paul. The guys that played in the Final Four in the Olympics. So you got Chernak, you got Hagel, you got Gensel, and Coop, who was involved as well, were not on the ice.
Right.
They were given the day off. And Victor Hedman, though, who didn't play in the elimination game for Sweden, was on the ice and I guess was involved in power play too. So that's a good sign for him to be in the lineup tomorrow. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Hi, fellas. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, exactly. I was curious to see who was out there. Victor was out there, and it looked like he was moving fine, and he was part of the power play. That was, all part of it. Worked both power plays. Wanted to see how he was moving. As you mentioned, Cirelli still in the red jersey, so those were the interesting things, and those couple of guys missing. So it's just trying to get back here and remember how to do all this stuff. Seems like we've been gone all summer.
Yeah, we've had to remind Lightning fans who's been in, who's been out, and I think for us it's a good refresher for sure. Before we get into the Lightning second half of the season, or really the stretch run, just overall thoughts on the Olympics and the games. I mean, everybody buzzing about USA and Canada and what a game that was. But did you have any, just general thoughts of what you saw?
I'm sure it's the same as everybody else has said. Some fantastic hockey, some, the best we've ever seen because of the speed of the game. I remember hearing Brian Boucher's comments. I don't even think it was a gold medal game. It might have been early on. He said, I have never been down here. I've never seen a game this fast ever. That's really saying something. He's been around the block, so he was between the benches. The fact that we had the overtimes, and I mean, what more could you ask for, as far as drama goes, as far as playmaking and goaltending, et cetera, it was fantastic. It was nail biting all the way, and they couldn't have asked for anything more.
This is 2 years in a row now where these tournaments, the Four Nations, last year I think fit the same bill, where you have best on best. You want to say some of the best players didn't play. I mean, there were only 4 nations last year. Russia, which has some tremendous players, didn't play in the Olympics this time around. But the quality of the play has kind of met the moment, right? Like sometimes you can get best on best and it's not as scintillating as this Olympic tournament was or last year's Four Nations. What do you make of that? Like, is that to you kind of how much the players really want to be involved in these types of tournaments and they are bringing everything they've got to the ice?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what a chance. I'm so jealous. We didn't get to do it in my generation. Pros weren't allowed. We went through that. It really took, to my recollection, it took 2 generations for it to be worked out with, the IOC and, the NHL and, who's a pro and who's not. We kicked that around forever and forever. And because of that, we weren't, allowed to go. So was I jealous? Yeah. I got to work the Olympics in Sochi for NBC, so I got to feel it and to do the games. And you have to really go there and really to understand what it's like to be in that environment, how fun it is, how you're totally immersed in it, even as an announcer. For a player, it's a whole nother level. So the fact that you're in the village, you see all the athletes, you go to different sports, all of that. So the hockey was fantastic. The players are so highly trained and so finely tuned, and the coaches have so many options, and the whole chemistry of the situation, how quickly can you get together, all those things. Like so many of the Swedes and the Finns have played together in world championships and have known each other a lot. Some of the Canadians have, some of the Americans have for sure, but there's always that thing about how quickly can the team get together, all of that stuff. And I found it all absolutely fascinating. And to watch players who are, everybody's a star on their own team, but to to come in, and some guys have to play roles and, fill in spots and kill penalties. And, and now the dissection is happening, as you knew it was going to happen, both for Team Canada and for the USA. And, the guys like Vincent Trocheck and JT Miller, like, why are they on the team? It's going to be penalty killing. They were perfect. No goals against for the entire tournament in penalty killing for the USA. Not a goal against. So does that vindicate the selections? Yeah, I would say, no doubt. You have to be able to score goals. They had enough guys to do that. And of course, Hellebuck, you guys have talked about that, I'm sure. So that's the obvious story. But when it comes down to the minutia of, for Canada, they're second guessing this and who should have played this amount and whatever. But in the long run, like we talked about, Greg, before the Olympics started, I said to you, Quinn Hughes, for me, is the biggest difference maker for the U.S. There is no doubt in my mind, because he is the closest thing I've seen to Bobby Orr in this generation. The only other guy was Scott Niedermayer for me. I'm talking about style.
Yeah.
Cale Makar is different. Cale Makar is fabulous. But style-wise, in almost every aspect of control, the way he skates, the way he moves around the ice, the way he sees players, all of those things, he reminds me of Orr. So he was not in Four Nations. That hurt. Look at the amount of ice time he played, and he's on the all-tournament team along with Makar. But he was the huge difference maker that I thought he was going to be. Defense, first of all, it's goaltending. We talked about that. Goaltending, and goaltending. Those are the three most important factors in a one-game shot.
Sure.
That proved to be true. The next for me is the defense, because of guys like Quinn Hughes and Makar who can control the game. The forwards are in it. They're in the neutral zone, getting the puck a lot. They turn around and boom, especially when you're playing against best on best. The door gets slammed in their face a lot. They have to pick their way through, find different ways, and a little momentum here and there. But defensemen, why do you think McKinnon and McDavid are so effective? What do they do all the time? They come back and swing deep in the zone, get the puck. McKinnon especially, he wants it because he knows coming up the ice, that's where he gets a chance. It's like a broken field running, a great running back in the NFL. They get some time and space, hopefully, to move and not be in that congestion between the blue lines and into the offensive zone. So all those things, I think, still prove to play out, even though systems are so, incredible right now. The overall game was fascinating to watch.
What do you think is going to be the challenge for everybody now coming back and resuming play starting tomorrow? Not only for the guys who were in the Olympics coming off that emotional high, but also the players who, had to find ways to continue to stay in shape or find their skills. Are you going to be looking, early on at the teams who've been able to kind of adjust and get going right away, knowing that the schedule is going to be pretty demanding at this point?
Oh, absolutely. Even in a normal all-star break, you see teams that go in hot and come out cold, or other teams go in cold and come out hot. Now, this is a couple of weeks. This is a whole nother level. The Lightning were outstanding, darn near miraculous with all the injuries. We've covered that. 19-1-1. Who saw that? Who saw that coming? Not a chance. Can you get any better than that? You can't. So the expectations, and Coop is really good about this, and the organization. Okay, that's done. Stop trying to, because everybody's going to bring it up to you. Okay, well, you were 19-1-1. Okay, so make it 21-1. No, you got to reset completely. Everybody's pretty much healthy except for Cirelli, who was wearing a red jersey. When he's coming back, I don't know. Braden Point was doing everything. I chatted with him a few minutes ago. He said, yeah, I'm feeling like just so much better. So, and of course, Victor Hedman and McDonough have been out, 30 games each, whatever, and Victor obviously went. But they're healthy. That defense corps, without them, played outstanding, to get to 19-1-1. Now who plays with whom? And what happens? So reset the table. Forget about the 19-1-1. Forget about what was happening. The great thing is go, yes, we did our job. We have our points in the bank, which Coop uses that term all the time. And then you go from there. But go with what's happening now, this minute, this game now, and push that in the rear view. The players coming from the Olympics will have a whole range of all that emotional stuff, everything from Jake Gensel winning the goal to the magnificent disappointment for Victor Hedman and the Swedes, not getting into the medals. They're professionals, but they're also human. So will it prove out necessarily in the first game or two? Maybe, probably not. There'll be a lull there somewhere, that psychological come down. They'll all have to handle it and push forward, and hopefully the team is winning along the way at the same time.
Brian, I have one more question for you just about the Olympic dynamic. And I actually asked Phil before the Olympics about the 72 Canada Cup, where Canada played Russia. And I said to Phil, were there any players on that Canada team that you absolutely hated? And what was it like to then have them as a teammate? And he said, for me, it was a little different because I was really the leader of that team. So it was my job to bring everyone together. But he also added the guys I really hated were not on that team. So that was part of it. In your experience in Sochi, for example, what was it like for players that really didn't like each other to come together as teammates, and then teammates to have to play against each other during this tournament and then come back together as teammates after the tournament?
Well, one of the things that really struck me last year at the Four Nations, something that Coop said when he was just putting the team together, once they had all the players, they had a get-together, and he just sat back and watched who talked to who sat with who didn't talk to the other guys. That's great sociology, right? And he started putting line combinations together according to what he saw, just to see what happens. It's really logical. It's brilliant. It's great sociology. So it just takes its own natural course. Sometimes you get surprised at who you end up, being friends with. The best example for me was the 81 Canada Cup. I played in that. I end up being friends with Ron Duguay and Kenny Linsman, and the Rat, Kenny Linsman, who would be friends with that guy? Especially he was who he was, and he played on the Flyers on top of it. But, it just happened, in practice or whatever. And I roomed with Barry Beck, and he's hilarious, so that has factors too, because we had roommates, and that was just who you got thrown in with. Then who your partners are, and you haven't played with certain guys before. So some of it takes its own natural course. Some guys have known each other from college or junior or whatever, friend of a friend, and maybe your best buddy on the team is really good friends also with so-and-so. So it's natural sociology, but it is extremely interesting. But then there's always, things that run deep. I'll go back to one of my best memories in all of National Hockey League was covering and playing in an old-timers game when I was with ESPN at the All-Star break. Excuse me. And Pi McKenzie was playing in it, and so was Henry Richard. And so walking to the locker room to put stuff on, they passed each other in the hall. And Mackenzie was a real intense guy, but also had, kind of a sense of humor. And Henry Richard was a grumpy old guy. I'm the first to say it. I saw him a lot in Montreal. And Pi just looks at him and goes, "Hey, Henry." And Henry just looked at him and went, like that. It never goes away for some guys. Never. And back in the original 6 days, I've heard so many stories about that. It's incredible. It's different today, but still, when a guy has beaten the hell out of you or has taken a cup away from you or any or all of those things, some guys are more sensitive to it than others. Of course, if you fought a guy, even some guys that fight, end up being friends. Yeah, it was a good fight. You've seen that, right? Guys beating the hell out of each other and then tap each other on the back on the way to the penalty box. Doesn't make any sense. Some guys can do that, and some guys cannot. It's just human sociology, but those things exist. It can still help because you're taught as a hockey player, it's about the team. How do you win? How do you win? How do you win? Everybody is there to win. And that's the bottom line. And those are the best of the best players realizing that you have to do what you have to do. Whether you hate that guy over there or not, if he's open, you better pass him the puck. If you carry things that far that you won't pass to him in order to win a game, then you are the one that shouldn't have been on that team.
That's a fair point. Brian, when you look at this Lightning team here in the stretch run, they've done so many things well. Maybe the biggest thing is just dealing with adversity and winning games despite all the injuries. Is that going to be something you're going to continue to monitor, or what's the biggest thing you're looking at with this Lightning team with the remaining, X amount of games as we head into the playoffs?
It's funny. It's a little bit like the Olympic teams. So many guys were hurt for so long. Victor and McDonough, two of the best examples. Who's going to play with whom on defense, and how quickly does it come back together? Do you automatically just put those things together? How about the guys who played so well while both those two guys were out? How do they feel about themselves? Where do they go? How much ice time do they get? Those things, getting great players back into the lineup is a great thing. Is it always a great assimilation back again? Because there's a pecking order, both in the room and on the ice. So does it always easily go right back hand in glove? Not necessarily. And the players don't know that, how it's going to work either. You just start playing, and then it's part on the coaching staff and Coop to say, well, this is working, that's not working. Hey, let's get going here. But that's back to what I was saying before about the 18-1-1. That was a different group of guys in some way, because you are getting key players back in the lineup, hopefully from here on, and nobody else gets hurt. So the dynamic has changed, and it's what you want, no doubt. But often when it comes with injuries, somebody steps forward. We talk about it all the time. Coaches, somebody else has to step up. Well, great. So that means somebody who was here in the lineup went to here, and then now he's back down to here. How does he feel about himself? And how does all that dynamic work? Have you lost him? Is he wondering again? Is he wandering aimlessly? Whoever that guy is. So you're resorting the deck again. There's a lot of interesting things that have to happen with the team. But, the big news, the good news is that everybody else is going through the same thing. This is a complete restart because the layoff was so long.
Last one for me, Brian, and this will be a topic until the date passes, but March 6th, we just talked about, is the trade deadline.
Yeah.
So there was the 1 year where Julian did absolutely nothing, and that was the year the Lightning won 62, and it's hard to argue with that. The team has been playing so well. What does your spidey sense tell you about, how active the Lightning might be if they can make a deal?
I think the most obvious thing to me would be a fourth-line center. A guy who can really win faceoffs, who has a history of winning faceoffs. If you can fit him in, that guy's got to have experience. Hopefully he's got Stanley Cup experience, but certainly playoff experience. And if he's that good, he probably has it, whoever that guy is. And off the top of my head, I haven't really worked through that, who it might be. But I think if anything, it would be that. The importance of faceoffs is always there. It comes and goes for the Lightning as far as effectiveness. Like Finley is a big, strong kid. He's done some good things. Doesn't have a lot of NHL experience. They're still bringing him along. In some other games, would you like to see another guy who has been around the block and done that and won some faceoffs and getting that third and fourth line, the bottom six scoring going a little bit? That's the areas I'll be looking at as well. Is who's producing on the third and fourth line. I think you pretty much know what the top six is, and you know what the checking line, the Yanni Gourde line, is the Yanni Gourde line, right? But that fourth line can be really key, especially when that guy is a face-off guy. So I would think for me that might be somebody they would be looking at.
And we should mention, we haven't actually talked about it, Greg. It happened right after we discontinued doing our shows for 2 weeks. Finley was claimed. They tried to slip him through waivers, and St. Louis claimed him. So best wishes to him. But that is an opening right-handed centerman who take faceoffs. The Lightning now have Braden Point, and that's it. On the roster.
That's what I mean. So he was doing his job, right? Feeling his way around. So they need somebody to fill that spot.
Brian, this is great. We always appreciate it. We'll see you at the rink tomorrow.
Well, we'll show up and see if I can remember how to do this after a couple of weeks off. I'm like, wow. It was fun.
For all of us.
For sure.
Yeah.
But it was good stuff. But here we go again, and boy, it's intense.
It is. All right. We'll see you at the rink. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Brian
Thanks,
Engblom. joining us right there. Always a good.
We didn't even
catch
get
up.
to that when we were back on the air yesterday.
What's that? How to do games?
Well, that, yes. We'll find out tomorrow, right? But, a lot of people were wondering, how would the Lightning fit some of these players who are coming off the injured list, and whether it was strategic in terms of when they tried to do it, but they tried to send Finley down, and he had to clear waivers, and he didn't clear. So St. Louis claimed him, where his dad played, among other places.
Sure.
So best wishes to Finley, but now the Lightning have one. So, with the injuries, too, you got Paul out, you got Cirelli out, Finley's no longer in the organization. So we'll see. We'll see how they address that. Who will start taking faceoffs? Nick Paul has been the best faceoff guy percentage-wise, but the fact that, he's not even on the ice after getting injured at the end of the Stadium Series game is an indication that, he's still a ways away. So who's going to pick up the slack on draws? And you're missing Cirelli, who takes a lot of faceoffs. He hasn't had the percentage of Paul, but, that's an opening that someone is going to need to fill.
Ranger 5253 said insider report came out today that there could be a Blake Coleman reunion. Well, look.
Lightning know him well.
They know him very well.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. He
signed a 5-year deal with Calgary, so that means he's on an expiring contract.
Would we be surprised? Look, if Julian can make it work, I will just, understand, know what you know. We do know that Julian is aggressive at the trade deadline. Understanding that if he can find a way to make it work, he will. And I think that's just how it plays out. Mythos says, who do you guys think we go after before the trade deadline? I think we 100% are going to make a move. So I don't know.
Well, we've talked a lot about face-off guys, and Brian just talked about a face-off guy that would slide in on the fourth line. I will maintain that they want their face-off percentage to be higher. We heard from Julian that he doesn't want to get a face-off guy at the expense of the rest of the lineup. But at this point, they are short at forward. So, they need bodies, right? Even if it's just to bridge the gap between now and the end of the regular season. So I think the concern about upsetting the apple cart goes down a little bit because you're going to have to find guys to fill roster spots. But if you were giving me my preference, I would say a right-handed face-off guy would be more preferable and would be preferable to a left-handed face-off guy. Because that is the side of the ice where the Lightning just don't have a lot of players. Point's the only guy. And his face-off role is kind of limited, honestly, with the Lightning. That would be the obvious need to fill. Now, if they can't get a righty and they get a really good lefty, that might still help them. Particularly if Cirelli is going to be missing significant time. By significant, I mean, at least a couple more weeks. And Paul is going to be out a significant amount of time. Those are 2-year centers.
Yep.
That take a lot of faceoffs.
For sure. I know we've, I'm not going to bring them all into the chat here, but we have a lot of people who are mentioning Trocheck as a guy that would be attractive because of the faceoff
that
abilities.
Price tag has to be high. I'm going to look up and see what his status is.
Hell of a player. You
He's
get somebody
player.
like that, you would really.
He is a jack of all trades. Because, with the Rangers, he'll play 5-on-5, he'll play power play, he'll play penalty kill. He takes faceoffs. He can score. He can pass. He is a terrific player. But, how much is this Ranger team going to rebuild? I would think Trocheck's not a spring chicken, but I would think he
What's
is
his
going to be an
contract?
important part. I'm looking it up right now. Yeah, he's got 3 years left after this year, Greg.
At what?
5.625. So that would require money out.
Yeah.
He also has a modified no trade clause.
I think
He's 32.
I think he would come. If the Lightning aren't on that list, I think he would make the exception to come to Tampa Bay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have a hard time thinking that would be the roadblock.
Right.
I think the roadblock would be making the numbers work, to your point.
Vincent Trocheck would help the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Just
Just like
100%.
you could say Vincent Trocheck would help just about every other team that would acquire him.
He
but
would.
the Lightning have no cap space, and do they have what it would take to acquire him? Those are the two parts of the equation. If they are, I mean, I'm sure that they would love to add Vincent Trocheck, but that logistically it may just not be possible.
I will say this, and maybe I'm more in the minority. I'm not going to get into every player that the Lightning potentially could trade. You have an idea. I think the biggest issue for the Lightning will be the cap. If you're taking on a player like Trocheck, I actually think they have prospects the teams would want. I'm not telling you there's a lot of them, but there's a few more than they've had recently, partner, where I think they'd look at it and say, all right, yeah, that player, pretty good players. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't forget, Radish and Kachuk were traded, and they were once thought to be pretty high-end prospects leaving. So I think you have guys comparable to them right now in the Lightning system. I'm not going to tell you they're going to end up being great NHL players, but that's part of being a prospect. There's that uncertainty. But I think the Lightning have enough there in their toolbox, partner, where they could dip in and another team could look at that and say, to the Rangers' point, who want to get younger, hey, the Lightning have 3 or 4 prospects we're looking at here. Maybe 2 of them we can get in addition to a player off their roster, and maybe we swallow some cap and we figure that out. I think Trocheck's harder to do.
Keep in mind, though, Greg, if I'm understanding the rule correctly, yes, the Rangers can absorb 50%, but that's for the rest of the contract. It's not just 1 year.
Correct.
So you'd be asking the Rangers to absorb 50% of his salary, not just for the rest of this year, but for 3 additional years.
Yeah.
That would be a significant ask and require a lot in return.
And
or more in return.
The more you're asking them to swallow, you're going to have to give up more. I think that's probably how I'd play that out. But we understand the point. Trocheck, a fantastic player. And if you want to go the face-off route, he's probably the high-end player of that list. The guy who can play, he can win face-offs. He's really the whole package. Look, on just about every team in the NHL, partner, wouldn't you say he could be, on your first line, and at worst, he's your second line center. I mean, that's the type of player you're talking about in Trocheck. This isn't some guy that's going to be on a fourth line playing 7-8 minutes and taking key faceoffs. I mean, this is you could call him, if you wanted to, in his own way, an elite player. So, I mean, we get where you're coming from, and certainly we appreciate the Trocheck mentions, but we've kind of given our reasons. Vlad says Tampa has a great problem with its roster. Hedman, Destu, Crozier, Lilleberg, Point, Cirelli, Paul. How can Julian strengthen our squad? I think, and of course, he's mentioning Vlad more on the injury side, I think, with all of those players potentially there.
Yeah.
Some are coming back sooner than later, right? I mean, that's just part of the process. I mean, look, the Lightning, to their credit, and maybe just to kind of put a bow on this type of conversation, they've really weathered this storm, and you can call it more of a storm. I mean, this has been almost a disaster in many ways for many teams. They have weathered that, and they have found guys who can come in and play, which is one of the sidebars to the conversation of trades. You have found some guys who maybe other teams are looking at and saying, all right, well, when that guy comes back, what are you going to do with that guy?
Right.
And that gives you some more options.
That's what our fans are always asking. And then I'm like, tap the brakes, please. I mean, I was not expecting that they would lose basically 3 guys in the Stadium Series game.
Yeah.
Cirelli, Paul, and Crozier. If Crozier got hurt in that game, unclear, but that was the last game that he has played. So they're like, well, these defensemen are coming back. Well, you know what? Now Crozier is not available for the rest of the regular season. So now they have 8.
For sure.
Could they go the rest of the way with 8 defensemen? They absolutely could. Now, you still have to make the cap situation work, but they can manage that. And then once you get into the playoffs, there's no cap in the playoffs except for your game roster.
Yep.
And I think most teams would be able to navigate that. And remember, the cap during the regular season is for your roster of 23. The same number is applicable for a game roster of 20. So you have a little bit more wriggle room there. But like for players that are added at the deadline that kind of are are breaking the bank, let's say, and teams can add them because they currently have other players on long-term injury. If those injured players come back in the playoffs, you cannot dress a lineup that exceeds the cap for a single playoff game. That's the new restriction this year. I'm not sure, depending on what the Lightning decide to do or don't do at the deadline. I mean, it seems unlikely that that would be a real problem for Tampa Bay, but we'll see. In other words, the players who are currently on long-term injury at this point, them coming back wouldn't like handicap the Lightning about like, well, we can't put Ryan McDonough in the lineup tonight. Not that they would do that because he makes too much money. You know, that's the problem. That's the new wrinkle this year, which is to combat the whole Nikita Kucherov in 2021 and Patrick Kane in 2015 and Mark Stone multiple years. You know, Tkachuk, the Matthew Tkachuk last year, where the Panthers added a bunch of money at the deadline. Matthew Tkachuk was on long-term injury, came back for the playoffs, right? So this is kind of a guardrail for that.
We have somebody who said the Avs and Penguins have recently made a trade. And
so we mentioned that the freeze was lifted.
It was lifted
a couple of days ago.
So who
Do you
knows?
have more information on that?
No, I just saw somebody on our message board here that mentioned it. Let's get to this one.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie says they have enough roster spots available with Point, Lilleberg, and Destu coming back. I don't forget people aren't coming back. I mean, there's going to be guys out, you know, as well.
Yeah. So you know what? Let me look at Puckpedia.
Love Puckpedia.
Yes, because that not only gives you the cap information, it gives you the roster information.
Kulak
too.
for Sam Girard, partner, is what we're getting.
That's an interesting trade. I really like Sam Girard. I wonder what went into that. Kulak came over from Edmonton in the goalie swap between Pittsburgh and Edmonton.
Yeah.
All right. Let me look at this and see who was on
Thank you, Carla.
injured situation. All right. Right now they have 13 forwards listed, but Cirelli is on there, as is Paul. So if you take those two guys out, that's 11, which seems low to me, but I guess that's where we are. And then, all right, 13 does not include, so they actually have point on long-term injuries. So let me actually count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not counting Cirelli. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I count 12 forwards, and we have the 8 defensemen. So according to that, you actually still have one extra spot. That's because they're so short at forward. So there's no issue, unless I'm counting wrong, Greg, there's no issue in just coming into the game tomorrow. Cirelli's on IR. Paul is probably going to go on, if he's not even skating, they may put him on LTIR. And Crozier is on long-term injury. So those 3 guys are coming out. Who's coming in? I mean, Hedman was on the roster at the Olympic break. So you're adding Point, you're adding Destu, and you're adding Lilleberg. That's an even swap, if I'm doing the math correctly. I think they'll be fine in terms of just roster number.
Should we call Julian and see if he wants to come on?
Yes. We need to have Julian
questions
on the show, but he probably would be interested in coming like before the season or after the season. Maybe we can piggyback his appearance with the block party, because he does a block party every year at the end of the year.
Looks like that trade also involving the Pens. The Pens get a 2028 second-round pick.
Okay.
For which I'm reading here. So there could be a couple of drafts.
So that actually means
back.
that Kulak is more. If it was just Kulak for Girard, the value of Kulak is higher than the value of Girard.
You would think.
Because the Penguins also got draft picks.
Yeah.
That's interesting. What was the motivation for Colorado, just having a terrific year? And
So
I really like Girard.
The only thing I can tell you, I know Kulak was playing with Letang. And Letang, who had not been playing particularly well, was playing some of his best hockey, but some felt like playing with Kulak helped. So I don't know if there's veteran defenseman who's calm things down there on the back end. You can play him up and down a little bit on the pairings. Who knows?
This may answer the question, though, Greg. I'm reading a tweet from Shayna Goldman, who's very knowledgeable generally, but she has a good post here. Like this trade a lot for the Penguins, just good business all around from the initial Kulak acquisition to flipping him for Girard in a second. Kulak is a solid D, but even more curious what they do with the cap space gained. So this is the reason why the Penguins got the draft pick is that they absorbed some cap space.
Gotcha.
I didn't see the contracts for Kulak and Girard. Girard makes more than Kulak.
Yeah.
That was why there was more value.
There you go.
In moving Kulak because it gave the Avalanche some cap space for a subsequent move, maybe. Although they gave up a really good player. Think about some of the defensemen the Avs have moved on from, including Bo Byram. I mean, he's a fantastic
terrific player. I mean, he's had injury issues for sure.
Not recently, though. Since he got to Buffalo, he's been healthy.
Girard is interesting because I remember him mainly the talk in Nashville, and he didn't play that much in Nashville, but there was a lot of buzz about him. I remember when he did come up, and then, I mean, he spent the majority of his career with Colorado.
Yeah, he was traded early in his career.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
This could be the beginning of something for a lot of teams here. Maybe the floodgates open, and we see what happens. Partner, we're over, but it was worth it. Our live show. Probably doing it again tomorrow live.
Yeah, I'll be in studio tomorrow.
You'll be in studio.
Lightning Leafs.
I wonder if
only trip Toronto makes to Tampa this year.
Interesting.
During the regular season.
I was going to say that. Anyway. I like the way you phrase that.
During the regular season.
We can have a lot of fun with that, but that should be a good game to get things going tomorrow night, Tampa Bay and Toronto. Partner, great job as always.
Yes, Leafs enter tomorrow's action, though, by the way, 6 points behind Boston for the second wild card spot. They got some work to do.
They do. Make it a little harder for them after a loss, hopefully tomorrow. Great job as always. Thanks to Steve Ersnick. Thanks to Brian Engblom. We appreciate you guys who listen. I'm Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.